So officially, we're starting tonight. Good evening. I'm Solimar Salas. I'm the Vice President for Museum Content and Programming at the Museum of Latin American Art. I recognize that I live and work on the traditional sacred lands of the Tongva, Kich, Akjamen, and Chumash, and many other indigenous groups who call these grounds their home. I honor and extend my gratitude to all of the original people still living in this region. Thank you for joining us as we begin another session of GRIT, G-R-I-T, Generating Radical Inclusion and Transformation. This series of conversations explores how grit, an attribute often given to people who overcome obstacles, can serve as a tool to build agency. With a specific focus on creative expression, GRIT seeks to expand what it means to practice art for social change. Support for the interpretive programming at MOLA is provided by the Dwight Stewart Youth Fund, the Norris Foundation, the Miller Foundation, Southern California Edison, Arts Council for Long Beach, Robert Gumbanner Foundation, and the City of Long Beach. Today's conversation is facilitated and hosted by Griselda Suárez. She is a writer, artist, cook, and a teacher. She was born in unincorporated East Los Angeles and walked Whittier Boulevard and Brooklyn Avenue in black and white saddle shoes. She grew up in a place where her thoughts did not easily find a voice. Instead, she found a pen and paper. Her hometown inspires her to investigate memories of a home space that continues to be bodiless. She believes that arts are essential in empowering others to express their thoughts. Throughout her career, she has created programming and trainings dedicated to facilitating transformation and creating agency for her communities. Remember, please, today's guest is Martha González, a Chicana artivista, musician, feminist music theorist, and associate professor in the Intercollegiate Department of Chicana, Latino, Latina Studies at Scripps Claremont College. She is also a singer, songwriter, and percussionist for the Grammy Award winning band Quetzal. With that, that's a very brief introduction for our guest and our host. Please remember for the audience to drop your questions into the Q&A window or the chat function, as we'll be monitoring those for questions at the end of the session. Feel free to enjoy this evening's programming, and thank you for joining us.
Gracias, Solimar.
Hello.
Gracias. I want to just say thank you to Mola for continuing to do this program and allowing me and to bring guests that I feel are doing work that transforms our communities every single day. And I'm so glad that Martha said yes. And I have to tell you, Martha, that as I was telling people that I was prepping for tonight, I had a lot of fans being so excited. They're like, oh my goodness. I think the music that you're a part of with Quetzal Flores and the bands and everyone who's been part of Quetzal, there was a moment in time that your music has captured our memories. And I think a lot of us just hark back to our young selves, but also you continue to do so much music and activism. Like the work has never stopped, it only has evolved. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for taking interest in it and for giving me this time.
So if you are joining us for the first time, welcome, bienvenidos, bienvenidas, todos. We are here to do a few things, to learn about these wonderful artists, performers, artivistas. I know you consider that to be your centered identity, right, Marta? And so we're learning about through a little storytelling. We're also learning about what people have produced, what they've made, what is out there in the world that they've given to us. And we also have Q&A. So it's a little bit of everything. And I believe tonight we're going to make some room for some music too. So that's going to be coming up. Yes. So Marta, let's first start with the storytelling part. How did you cultivate your creative voice? Where did that begin for you?
Wow. Well, like a lot of folks, as a child, right? My dad was an aspiring singer. He wanted to be kind of like a Mexican crooner. Like Javier Solis, Jorge Negrete, Pedro Infante. And as a Mexican immigrant from Guadalajara, Jalisco, you know, and being an immigrant in the U.S. was difficult. He didn't speak the language here, and so he kind of like, that he came here because it was difficult to make a living in Mexico, and coming here, he found himself struggling to survive rather than cultivating an artistic voice and career, right? But he nevertheless was always sort of dreaming and like would enter contests and like things like that, and so music was always part of our household. He was always singing or practicing, or he bought a shiny black wall piano, which he didn't know how to play at all. He didn't know how to read music, but he would leave partituras open, or like sheet music, as if somebody in the house had played, and he had a guitar which he also didn't know how to play. So it's sort of like around the house there was a lot of longing and joy for the music, but not a whole lot of time left to be able to live the life of an artist, right? And because of survival and I was one of four kids. My brother's the eldest, and it's myself, and then I have a sister named Claudia, who's also a musician, and my brother is an amazing musician as well. And then we have a younger sister named Carla, and so survival took precedence and center stage in the home. And but what also was a little sad was that my dad always lived with that longing and a life he never got to live, and so he kind of, I think there were other things involved, including substance abuse, and he kind of fell into sort of like his a broken heart, and kind of drank himself to death. And so so it's a sad story in that way, but also a great lesson in thinking. In the rest of my life has really been about unpacking what it means to be an artist in the world. And so everything else from then on out has sort of has been kind of myself trying to undo those original teachings in the home. And every community experience that I've had since then is kind of unlearning that first experience of music.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think that is so open. That's just, a radical open story to share with us. Thank you. I think many times um, what I see in how people think of Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx communities or Latinx communities is that we somehow need culture from somewhere else, but we have a lot of arts and culture in our families, right? So thank you for sharing that is really ingrained in us as we grow up, that it's always present. I appreciate it so much. Now, you mentioned guitar and you mentioned piano, but I know you play percussion. So where did percussion come in?
Well, in so after my dad left, I was I would say that the first time I experienced percussion was as a folklorico dancer, right? Like like a lot of Chicano kids or Mexican American kids growing up in these households, your mom's trying to find a way to get you involved in something, and the first thing she thought of was folklorico. And luckily we had it in our elementary school. I was born and raised in Boyle Heights and went to Lorena Street School, and there was a Greek American woman there. Her name was Helen Stringos. She's legendary now in the school system because she taught for about 36 years in LAUSD, and I forget how many years at Lorena, but she had a folklorico group and she taught us everything there was to know. She spoke Spanish. She loved Mexico. She should have just been Mexican, pero she was Greek, and a first generation Greek American. And she taught us everything about folklorico. And my favorite region was Veracruz, which is highly percussive. And I loved it. I was just into it, and I still am, ironically. But that's the first time I experienced percussion at its core, but with my feet. But later on, after meeting Quetzal Flores and the band Quetzal, they needed a singer. We knew a mutual friend. He used to roadie for a guy named Marcos Loya. Two guys would roadie, and the other friend, Marky Hernandez, gave him my number. And so once I started playing with the band, the original conga player left. And so I had kind of I used to mess around on the congas just by listening, and he'd be like, you could probably learn really fast. So he got me a teacher, and I got the best teacher. His name was Ricardo Tiki Pasillas. He's prolific. He travels and tours all the time. He's like just an amazing musician. And he's still playing out there. And he gave me my first conga lessons. And so I learned a lot of stuff from him, as well as, and then I transferred, I've had so many teachers since then. In Chequere, I've had one of the Terry family, Junior Terry, who is now in New York, based out of New York, but they're Afro-Cuban Chequere players, prolific Chequere players. And then I learned bata and which are barrel-shaped, Afro-Cuban drums, traditional drums from Cuba. And my Francisco Aguabella and Felipe Garcia Villamil have been my teachers. So percussion has always been a thing. There's something about it that I absolutely loved. And so a lot of the rhythms that I've learned in other instruments, I've transferred onto my feet. So I've always been a zapateado dancer. And so percussion is kind of like in my body.
And I've seen it. I've seen you perform many times. It definitely is such a large part of who you are. I can imagine you living the world as a percussionist and hearing sounds and rhythms all the time. You are a wonderful musician. You're a wonderful researcher. I know that there are plenty of awards that you're, I'm sure, proud of. Your Grammy, right? You're a Fulbright Scholar, you're a Ford Scholar, you're a Woodrow Wilson Fellow. And something really cool that I don't know a lot of people know is that your tarima and your zapateado shoes are at the Smithsonian, the National Museum for American History. How did that happen?
Yeah, that was really cool. They're on permanent display there, which I was very proud of in the One Nation, Many Voices exhibit. There were many years where, we've been at it for many years, right? And I've gone through many shoes and many tarimas. Actually, that's the first tarima. It took quite a beating. And it started getting a little wobbly. So I remember putting it in the garage and thinking, I didn't want to throw it away. And it was just sitting there. And then I had another pair. I've gone through a bunch of pairs of shoes, but those shoes that I had were really special. I bought them in actually a town that is Naulinco, that's known for shoes, zapateado shoes in Veracruz. So I've had those for many years. They're not my original ones, but I've had them for many years and I love them. And so I was about to retire those. And over the course of that time period, I had a friend who, it's a curator who asked somebody else that knew me, she was trying to look for artifacts and people, and she had Judy Baca, and she said, I want another Chicana that, what they're doing. And so then she started asking about me. And she said, why don't you email her and see if she's interested and has anything? That would be great. That's a great story. She knew my story. And so when I was asked by the friend, I said, yeah, I think I have something. And so, I asked, I'm like, I don't think anybody would want this, because I had just put them in the garage and the shoes were in my closet. And she said, that's perfect. That's amazing. Please, and so, and can you write something up about it? And so there's a whole writing on the website of the Smithsonian. And we'd been in contact with the Smithsonian a lot as well, because we had an album, a couple of albums with them. And and I had been a part of the Folklife Festival for many years as a presenter and a performer. So it's like, it was all kind of like, it all just came together. And so then one day when I was a presenter, I was at the Folklife Festival, and they're like, can you turn them in today? And I was like, yeah, sure. That's the last time I used them for Rinsler concert. And then I just handed them over. I was kind of sad too. I was like, this is really crazy. Okay, I guess they want my stinky shoes and my tarima.
Can you explain a tarima if someone in our audience doesn't know what that is?
Sure, it's a stomp box. So it's for lack of a better, tarima actually means platform in Spanish, but it's an instrument I've used. It's a wooden platform that has sound holes in it. And I basically traveled with that as a percussion instrument for many years with the band Quetzal. And it's just small. It's almost the size of a suitcase, because it's just meant to sort of handle me on it. And so I've been stomping away at that for many years. And it was beat up. I had stickers all over it from different bands that we'd opened for. I'd had folks like sign it, from Ban Ban to, Maldita Vecindad, all the different bands that we'd opened for, Cubanismo, like it's signed all over. And so it's also very special in that sense, right? It has a lot of memory. It's been beat up, and the article that I wrote for the Smithsonian is sort of runs down like what it's been through, kind of thing, including a theft, which they stole all our instruments and they left this thing there because they were like, "What's esto?" And so that's the only thing that was left, including one of my shoes. So
wow. Thank you. That's I think a really wonderful honor for you. I just think that's so cool. I have some students in the room. I'm sure some of my students are here, maybe other students. I shared this with several of the institutions we're a part of. And something I always ask guests is if they can share a little bit about your educational journey.
Yes, I'm noticing that my battery is dying. So can I just turn on the...
Yes, of course.
I can't believe I'm just noticing this now. You know how it warns you? Sorry about that. Just hang on.
It's okay. This is when people know that it's live and ready to go.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry about that. It got slowly disconnected somehow. And so the question was...
Educational journey.
Oh, man. So it feels really good for you to, for folks when they're, and I put them, we make our own bios sometimes, right? And so I put all my awards in there. But I always say this, and especially when it's safe spaces, that I have failed a lot more than I have succeeded. I look great on paper, but I think it's really important to also note that I've dropped out of school twice, that that I didn't always get the grant, that I didn't always get the awards, and I was passed up for a lot of stuff before I succeeded. And to this day, it still happens, right? So I'll say that much. And for me, what I realized, especially in academia, is that music kept bringing me back to, always gave me the greatest lessons, political and social lessons, not just in books and not just in listening and being inspired by other artists, but also by being in communities with music, right? And playing alongside others and community. Like, those lessons have been the greatest lessons for me. And also music as a tool always brought me back into academia, ironically, right? So I'm in junior college at Pasadena City College. I think I'm going to become a dental hygienist. And I auditioned for a movie that requires me to sing. And because I can sing, I get this part. I drop out of school to go do this Sister Act 2, which I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but I was in Sister Act 2. I sing for the album. I get to meet all these amazing people, including Lauryn Hill and like these singers. And I sing in a choir, which I'd never sung in a gospel choir. I learned so much, and it's over. But it was a generous amount of money where I was like, I have to do this. I'm never going to make this kind of money ever. So I did it, and I dropped out of school for that, right? And I got to buy a working vehicle, and it's a long story. But I was very sad that I did that. But in the course of trying to come back to school, my cousin was going to UCLA ethnomusicology program, and she said, this was a perfect program for you because it is music, but it's not on stage. And I was totally... By then, I hadn't really sung that much anymore because I had, my dad had, I just kind of, the industry, I wasn't even into that in that way. So next thing I know, I'm in the ethnomusicology program. I auditioned, I get in, and I start learning way more about music and these other ways of existing with and alongside music. And then after, I was in the band Quetzal by then, and then the band and all the experiences, both on the ground and in communities all over the US and in Veracruz and in Chiapas and all of these other spaces, otra educación, and so then and then that after many years, I decide to be a mom. And then I'm like, I tell my partner, I think I want to go back to school. I keep thinking about stuff. And, he's like, do it. And so I go back to school, I mean, after had it not been for a woman named Olga Najera Ramirez, who is a professor, retired professor from the University of California, Santa Barbara, who asked me, what do you do on the tarima? You do zapateado, pero no es tradicional. It's something else. What is it? And I said, oh, it's just stuff. Like I mix rhythms up. And she's like, can you write about that? So this is way before the museum thing. And I started writing up what it is. And so she would read it, send it back, read it. And next thing I know, I have a piece to submit to grad school. And that led me to apply for a Fulbright and to go to grad school. So again, music, or the experiences of music, and starting to write about it. And then meeting all of these different academics that would write about our music as Quetzal, I thought was also like, oh wow, you could do this, like write and write about music, okay, in community and in culture. And that's something I've always enjoyed, and it just kept pulling me in, you know. And next thing I know, I'm in grad school. I'm like, okay, I'm in grad school, I'm writing about music. And so, and the first place I could write about it with authority was my own experience, right? Knowing that my experience had been unique. And so, and in a lot of ways, and really taking in the totality of my life. So one of the things for school, I would say, is that, and I tell my students all the time, don't check any part of yourself at the door, right? Don't leave any part, like, somos lo más, si podemos ser completos, the more complete we are, the more skill sets and more value we bring to ourselves and our students and anything we want to learn or teach, or right, like, and that's always, I feel like once I started embracing my whole self is when all of these different things started coming to me, and I started valuing myself in a very different way, regardless of white supremacy out there in the colleges, and not seeing enough of ourselves or brown people in colleges, in college settings. Sometimes I come in there like ready to swing, you know, like, this is who I am. I talk how I talk. I have an accent, y que, like my mind, and, you know, and the ideas that I have, todas las ideas que yo puedo portar, all the ideas that I can give are valuable and are important. And the more I did that, the more I felt like I grew and made connections that I think I wouldn't have done had I silenced any part of myself.
I think you hit on something that is hard for many people to do, and walk into that room and say that my ideas are valuable. That is difficult for us, even, right? We say that we are professionals, we have our field, we do our work. And I just want students to know, and everyone really, not just our students, that it is still difficult to walk in as a Chicana into that space, right? And for young students walking into any classroom, we know, we feel it.
Yeah, it's called the imposter syndrome, right? You feel like, oh, I'm just here for whatever reason, or like, or they feel sorry for me, or affirmative action, whatever the hell you think is going on. You know, I think that we're fed that, but in reality, we have lived, right? We have lived, we have experienced, we have a voice. And if you have lived, if you've experienced anything in your life, and particularly if you're a brown person in America, right? And all the different identities that we may have and you may identify with, you know, you have an experience that is valuable. And the academy particularly, or any predominantly white spaces, that they need to hear it, right? We need to be present, and it's hard to be courageous sometimes, but we have to push through that sort of thing that we're constantly hearing, that we're not good enough, that we're not, you know, and it gets easier and easier is what I'm going to tell you, right? Because then you start realizing, like, wait a minute, this is just this lack of, or this feeling is a construct, right? That we're fed. Y si me lo creo, if I end up believing it, then it has done its job on me, right? And the goal is not to let it do its job on you, right?
So what did you write for your dissertation? What did you focus on?
Well, I you know, usually the goal is to come up with an original thought, right? An original thought. And part of what I decided to do is really talk about the community and movement that I came from, and how we started calling ourselves Chicano Artivistas, right? An Artivista, which is a title or an identity that I utilize a lot, right? And part of it is, again, unpacking those original ideas my father had taught us, right? When seeing his broken heart and what the music world was, and lo que no le dieron, and like, I wanted to be famous and all. I mean, or make a living in this music. And if you realize what music really is and how capitalism has tarnished the original intention of music, or the industrialization of music in the worst sense of the word has tarnished for us, is creativity, right? And so part of what artivistas have done and have learned so much from the Zapatista movement, a lot of different indigenous movements, but particularly from the Zapatista movements, and in this 1997 Encuentro, is that music, art, and culture are important tools in our community, right? That music can also be process, right? A way of being in community with music, right? So, which is what we learned in the 1997 Encuentro, that music doesn't always have to be product, right? Something you buy or you sell. That music can actually be a way in which that we live with music, right? It's un desahogo, it's a community practice, right? That doesn't have, the goal isn't to be famous or to record an album. The goal is to be the most present human being in this amazing practice, right? And so we've learned so much and connected with so many different communities that believe this very same thing. And that is one of the other practices that we're very involved in is, well, for one is the collective songwriting method, which we've utilized quite a bit. And the other, and yes, I talk about this in my book a lot, and thank you for sharing this. This is the title of my book, Chicano Artivistas, Music, Community, and Transborder Tactics in East Los Angeles. And that's kind of what I do in my book. I'm like unpacking music and the music conception over time and how it changes based on these different community practices. And the idea is I'm not saying like, we got to replace the industrialization of music and capitalism and music. It's not even that. It's more like getting us to think about how music can be also something else, right? There are a lot of people that dedicate their entire lives to their careers and playing and recording and selling. And, that's really great. Like that will never go away. That's important. I have much respect for people that just do that, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot, and it also takes a lot out of you, right? And if you know the industry, you know that it's very extractive, right? And we have experience with that as a band, as individual and collective musicians, right? And so we decided to, as artivistas, our goal is not just to proliferate our own careers, but to also do that, create processes, or use our skill sets to engage communities in creative expression as well, for no other reason than to have meaningful dialogues and inspirational moments with the community, right? So we do collective songwriting workshops. We are part of a Fandango community, which is a process, participatory music and dance practice native to the state of Veracruz. This is part of what we do, we're part of talking about it, about practicing it, teaching it, but also, again, having these collective songwriting workshops with communities in struggle, or communities that are thriving, or communities that want to have a conversation with youth, at large, behind bars, all of this stuff. Process. So Artivistas is not just about doing art and activism. It's not just not for me. That's not what it is. And a lot of people are using it interchangeably. Eso no es artivismo para mí. Para mí, ser artivista is paying attention to process work, to being really engaged in the community, engaging in process-based work, as well as your own career.
Thank you for saying that. I think that in these last 4 years, I believe that artivista, artivist, social practice have reached academic circles, right? And in some cases, definitions or practice of these words that really grow from grassroots folks, right, in the community have changed. The definitions have changed, right, because it has to fit the academic world in a certain way. So thank you for saying that. I agree that there a lot of creativity is not an individual process. I think in some ways for me, in going through a master's and then through an MFA program, it was very much centered in the individual. And I kept fighting because I was like, no, this is a community process. It's not just about me going away in a locked room. I tell students this all the time. The writers, I believe writers don't write that way. There's a lot of engagement you have to do in community in order for las ideas to, para que salgan, right? To be inspired. It doesn't just come from energy from one person.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that these last 2 years have been difficult for all of us, but you, Quetzal, you still been creative, right? As a group, as a band, and you have an album, Puentes Sonoros, and that came out last year, right? 2020.
Yes.
And usually there's a tour, there's gatherings to hear the music. How did it feel to release something during 2020?
Well, it feels good that you have music out there, and it was kind of backed up for a number of reasons in the record company, the Smithsonian Folkways. But it was great that it finally came out, and we try to do some things online as much as possible. But I mean, it's hard. You don't get to share it with folks. You don't get to have a record release party, that kind of thing. We did have some sharing of listening stuff, but for the most part, it just kind of like, it came out and then that was it, but we're starting to tour more now. We're gonna start taking, and again, our lives are really, we have other work, again, we're still have other jobs. I'm a associate professor. Quetzal is also doing a lot of work with his new organization, the Community Power Collective, as well as the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. And but we just still try to mix it up here and there.
So what are some of those projects or initiatives that you're working on in your,
Oh,
as your professor role, as your musician role?
Well, I want to invite Quetzal over here to talk a little bit about the collective song. I mean, the Community Power Collective, because I think that we, as an associate professor, I'm constantly pulling my students into the Community Power Collective and some of the work that they're doing, and along with the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. But I've been teaching the same, various courses. I alternate different ones. And I utilize some of the skill sets that we've learned again in Chiapas, and I teach around the fandango as well, and not just about acquiring the practice, but also about some of the value systems and things of that sort. I'm also a board member for Self-Help Graphics, which we're making great strides there. We own our building. We're about to start building out a new space, a new bigger and better space, as well as a part of pushing back on some of the gentrification happening here in East LA and Boyle Heights, with the Fideicomiso Tierra Libre. I'm part of the board there as well, and as well as the Smithsonian Folkways board. I'm kind of a busy gal. I'm thinking about it right now. Oh shit! I mean, shoot, kind of crazy stuff out there, But yeah, and anyway, this guy also has a bunch of stuff, like So anyhow.
Yeah, bring Quetzal over. Yeah, let's.
Yeah, what's up with that guy? He's like, let's play.
Okay, we can do that too. I know there you would like to share some music. That would be wonderful. I know there's some videos too that you wanted to share. I don't know if you want to share any media, whatever you'd like. We have time for both if you want.
Okay. I would love to share, perhaps, when I talk about the collective songwriting method, perhaps it's not as easy to conceive if I don't show you a little bit of that, what it is. So you're going to see some footage of the 1997 Encuentro, as well as all the different spaces that we've been doing it in. And so how much time do we have? I'm just wondering, like 30 minutes.
We still have about 20, 25 minutes.
Okay, so I'll show a little bit of this, and then we can, yeah, so you can see. So here we go. Right. Oops. All right. Can you see this? Se ve? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Okay, hang on. Sorry. Let me play.
Yes.
¿Por qué dice eso? A ver, habla un poquito más. Al decir que los padres en la escuela, explíqueme más. ¿Quién dijo eso?
Tienen que trabajar con los padres y darnos el derecho de poder escoger la forma de cómo trabajar con nuestra juventud.
Collective songwriting really brings the community in to do the work of music. It really brings them in to engage in that process. And by having them be a part of that process gives them a sense of ownership to the ideas, to the discussions that are taking place while they're creating music, as a way of articulating something beyond what's written on paper or what's being suggested by somebody else. This is something that music allows them to create for themselves. And I think that has been the most powerful thing to witness in every one of these spaces.
Este evento fue maravilloso, Iluminarte, porque me iluminó hasta ser como compositora de canciones. Fue algo muy divertido, expresivo, en donde podemos transmitir sobre el arte, sobre la educación, sobre nuestros derechos, y esto mismo que aprendimos vamos a transmitirlo a nuestros hijos y a nuestra comunidad.
We've had workshops on DACA DAPA and deferred action. We've had workshops on the local control funding formula. We've had workshops on Boyle Heights for youth and youth advocacy in general. We've had workshops on Prop 47 and reduced sentencing. We've had workshops on restorative justice. So we've done a lot of work and put a lot of, have invested a lot of time and energy into this idea of collective songwriting.
The band Quetzal and individual artists that are part of that collective have really been working from a place of deep heritage and community aesthetics and values, and exploring a lot of different kinds of music, and also a process that is part of all kinds of traditional arts, a process that's rooted in community. And so from that emerges Quetzal's collective songwriting methodology, which is very hand in glove with traditional arts processes. And so it was very natural evolution for ACTA to be able to take advantage of these artists who have a lot of experience in this methodology and to bring that to a larger scale in Boyle Heights.
Collective songwriting as a method and the ways in which Chicano Activistas implement it in community has roots in the Zapatista movement. The Zapatista movement is a movement that really identifies autonomy and self-determination for communities in struggle. A group of Chicano artists, activists went to Chiapas and studied these methods, and the musicians studying these Zapatista methods developed the collective songwriting method, along with a very important figure in the movement, and her name is Martha González.
This is coming out of a Chicano tradition, Chicano community that has been doing art and activism for many decades. It's part of the ethos, part of the fabric of the Chicano community. And so collective songwriting has now become a very important piece of that fabric that not only establishes a space where a community can have a conversation through the composition of a song, but that artists themselves have a space at the table for social justice and organizing.
It's a recycling world. Everybody sing that for me, please. Nice and loud. Da, da. I'm recycling my bad ways to make some better days. It's a recycling world. Again, nice and loud. I'm recycling my bad ways to make some better days. It's a recycling world.
looking at my mama's face, man, tears in her eyes. Asking God, why did he do this to me? This is playing like a movie. Stuck in the sand, trying to find another plan. I'm not gonna be that bum man, kicking that can. I'm trying to be a grown man, handle my priorities as a young teen minority.
Lace up my shoes when I'm in the game. You can't shine like me, cause everybody's not the same. My dreams is like never ending rain. If you took a couple steps in my shoes, you will feel my pain. Life full of crime, a lot of things in my mind. Teen life's getting took, so I'm trying to refrain. The dirty south is the place from where I came. Trying to make a living, can't hold chump change. Cops killing off African Americans. It's a cold world that we're living in. Can't take it, so you know I find different ways to claim life. So I gotta get it in.
I will stop right there, but that is what I'm talking about. So where it's not, oh, sorry, my familia. So that's the idea, right? That it's not just about that, it's process oriented, right? So all of those people that you saw, you know, we got together and this is all they were all the ideas, you know, and out of the ideas come important testimonials, right? That folks are understand, and there's critical consciousness there, right? Their analysis of life, of the system itself, right? Like those kids you just saw right now, they know what's happening. They know what recidivism is. They know police brutality. They've lived through so many things, and it's through songs that they get to sort of se desahogan, but they're also sort of being critically, you know, they're connecting the dots and saying, all of these things, and I need help looking for a way out. I'm trying to stay out. This is all their lyrics. We didn't write anything for them. We just facilitate the space. We provide the music. We are constantly going back and forth with the dialogue. And so that's just, you just saw the end game, but you didn't get to see all the discussion that took place that brought us to that point, you know? And so anyhow, yeah.
That's a beautiful process. Thank you for continuing that work. Absolutely. Absolutely needed in so many different communities, right? Are you disseminating this practice? Are you teaching this practice? Or is it happening in other communities other than in our LA area?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've gone all over, and including it during the pandemic, we've given workshops and trained music educators. We're in the process of doing that consistently. Whenever we're asked, we go ahead and do it. We train musicians locally as well. There are many musicians now implementing that same practice, some through corridos, some through other forms, you know, the sones, you know, all kinds of ways. And so there's a value system and an ethic to it. And we make sure we understand that first, and then we move forward and teach best practices, different ways. And again, every musician has their own style of implementing it, but the value system is still, we want to make sure that it's always there. And so that's what we've been doing. Yeah, we're sharing it. The goal is to have it outlive this practice, outlive us, right?
Yes. All right. Well, I as Arts Council, as MOLA, I think that's something else we can maybe talk about in the future, or see how we can incorporate these workshops into what we do here in Long Beach. That would be wonderful. But I know the whole familia is there now.
Yes.
There's some music coming to us.
Yeah, you want to hear a song? Song break?
Let's do it.
This is Sandino and Quetzal. Can you hear it?
Yes, we can. I can hear. I think everyone else, yeah. Bienvenidos. Hola.
See the mushroom rise. Hold me. flowers die. Kiss me as the rivers run dry. I believe your lips are all I need. I won't go thirsty. I will not hide. As the world ends around us, as others fight and die, we keep doing all we can. Broken time, one by, because even in the end, I feel strong by your side. 'Cause as hard as we love, we're victorious, and justice never dies. Justice never The dust has settled. Open your eyes, we're still alive. Some evaporated, sold out, gave up, or just went blind. But we can see and look, everything we built is intact. The way we love and celebrate, the way we laugh, as we build the world around us, as others still fight and die. We keep doing all we can. We don't just survive, we wanna thrive. 'Cause even this new beginning, I feel strong by your side. 'Cause as long as we're in love, we're victorious, and justice never dies. Our love, oh, never dies. Our visions never die. Our hopes never die. Tan tan. This is Sandino and Quetzal. Tan tan.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
A ustedes, gracias. Uh-oh, hang on. What's happening here? Okay. There we go.
That was great. Thank you so much. Is that on the new album?
No, it's not actually. It's on Spotify, and we released that at the beginning of the pandemic. It was written right as we were starting the pandemic, so we were kind of been in the process, and so the lyrics are just about the fear of, kind of feeling like the world was ending, the pandemic, and then all the the uprisings and stuff like that. It just felt that way, and so it's a little bit of both sides of the story of what it feels like to you know come feel like it's ending, and then also realize what it's like once the dust is settled and what you're gonna do now.
Wow. Well, that was beautiful. Muchas gracias, Sandino, Quetzal, Marta, for that. I was not expecting the music tonight, but thank you so much for bringing it. Let's take some Q&As. Let's take some questions, give some answers. How about that?
That sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So we'll begin opening that up for everybody, and okay, now the Q&A session is open. Feel free to use the Q&A box to provide your questions to Marta. How would you, after tonight, people are hearing, they're inspired. How would you suggest people to get involved through music in their community or begin to do that kind of impact work? What would be the first step?
Well, I think that one of the first things that we recommend, and is to kind of look in your families, right? Oftentimes, we think of ourselves and are constantly being told that we're under-resourced, but oftentimes we're not looking as deep as our own families to know that there are folks in the family that know how to do things, whether it's music or other things. And then the next thing is just to work your way out, right? Like, and then look to community, within your communities, what's going on, what are some of the things that you can participate in that are already happening, and, and move out from there. But in terms of some of the work that we're involved in, I would suggest, going to the Alliance for California Traditional Arts website, which is ACTA online, and .org. And if you go onto that website, you can see a bunch of things that you could participate in that are going on, including you can also download for free some of the publications. You can see different videos of how some of this work is being implemented in all of these different spaces, and a lot of really great work. And again, because it's California based, if you're in California, you can actually map out and see what is happening in different parts in California, including the Inland Empire, the Coachella Valley, like all of the different kinds of art and creative work related to social justice, and how it's taking shape all over the state of California. And also the Community Power Collective, which Quetzal didn't really get a chance to talk about, but they also have a website, and it's CPC Collective. CP Collective. He's chiming in over there. Can you hear him? Yes. CP Collective. He's had a long day, but you want to come over here and talk a little bit now?
Understood. We understand.
Está comiendo. Sorry. Yeah. cpcollective.org, right? And if you go to cpcollective.org, that's a wonderful site that really is showing you how art and culture can be utilized and harnessed for community benefit, and also all other things you can get involved with.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, how about sharing a little bit about who are you listening to? What are those emerging voices maybe we should listen to or read? Even who else is writing some great books?
I belong to a group of amazing community, just academics that are really pushing the envelope. And I encourage you all to look up people like Micaela Diaz Sanchez, Jade Sotomayor. They write about both the Son Jarocho and Bomba, and how that's taking shape. There are some folks in the pipeline, Also, you know, wonderful work. There's a lot of wonderful work that's centered around Zapatista work, like Michelle Tellez and her new book. She's at University of Arizona, and as well as folks like Michelle Habel Payan, who's been around for a while, as well as, you know, Chela Sandoval, the classics, right? Chela Sandoval, Cherie Moraga. There's folks in the pipeline like Yesenia Hunter, a historian out of USC, is now in the Yakima Valley, as well as, you know, wonderful work by Iris Viveros Avendaño. She's amazing. Yeah, it's great work.
Excellent. And how about musicians?
Man, there's a lot of really great. I was just thinking right now, you know, the Paramount. Recently on my Instagram, I gave a shout out to a bunch of folks, but I can think one group right now. They're called Lucy. Another one is called. These are young folks coming up. I mean, besides the folks that are out there already, like Irene Diaz, for example. She's amazing. I always turn my students on to her music. El Haru Kuroi, a great lead vocalist and guitarist in that group, as well as the band, really young folks. One is called Lucy, the other one is called Introverted Funk, and then there's another group. Man, those two groups really like blew my mind. They're amazing, and I just heard them for the first time. And you know, Las Lindas Lindas also, they're a punk rock group. They're really great. So yeah, you know, there's, you know, East LA, Los Angeles always has so many musicians and, you know, music coming out. And of course, I always recommend for Los Bailables and all the wonderful work and singing and musicianship. There's a great band out there called La Verdad, that's led by Gabriel Gonzalez, my brother.
Yeah. Awesome. Solimar, do you have any questions? I'm going to bring Solimar in.
Solimar.
Well, it's been an honor. I think I'm always open, like Griselda mentioned. Mola's always open to see how we can diversify and expand voices that are heard through the institution. So always open to venture into that space. And thank you so much for you and your family for this treat tonight. I'd like to know, and I know we're wrapping up soon, so I want to be conscious of everybody's time. I think it's more, where do you see yourself in 5 years, let's say?
Wow. Well, probably doing the same sort of stuff. Maybe, hopefully, if I stay disciplined, I can, you know, I have another sort of idea and book idea in the pipeline. It's not being published by any one person, any one publisher anytime soon, but I really want to, you know, explore new ideas and documenting women in music in other ways. I have a whole course that I've designed that's called Women Who, you know, along with different organization, student-led organization in the University of Washington called Women Who Rock. But we have courses, a course that I modeled after that model, and with the help of Michelle Habel Payan and my mentor. And so I'm kind of like a book, more book ideas, more publications. You know, I have some in the pipeline already for Oxford Press and other things. So I'll probably still be publishing. I'm probably going to, in 5 years, I'll probably be heading to my son's college graduation. He's probably roll his eyes right now. But that's the idea. And probably still writing music and working in community, you know, just doing the same kind of stuff. You know, what I do have to learn how to do a little more is rest. Or just be able to sit back and, you know, I have a sabbatical coming up and I need to just like, I think I want to learn how to meditate as well. And just, you know, just keep learning. I feel like I'm an eternal student. I never stop learning, and I want to just, that's one thing I think I do need to learn, and take care of my body. I've been through a lot this year. I have a bulging disc, TMI, but I have a bulging disc that I'm recovering from, and being able to walk again and not live in pain has been such a blessing. And it makes me realize, like, health is really important. And so I'm paying a really close attention to what I'm putting in my body, what I'm doing, how much exercise I'm getting, getting up and moving around, that kind of thing. So health, spiritual, emotional, and just the stuff that just keeps coming,
Yeah, it's looking for that balance, right? It's how do you keep your brain engaged while achieving that balance so that you're not going to the extremes.
And the biggest thing, I think, what I'm trying to really think about, and it reminds me of something that Gustavo Esteva and Suri Prakash have mentioned, is that I'm really trying to protect my sense of hope right now, because it's really difficult right now. As we all know, we're all going through it. I learned a very sad truth today. I know somebody, we weren't close, but I know somebody who passed and took her life, and I'm just like, sadness and hopelessness is out there. And I want to really protect hope in my own sense of hope, my families, just try to really be mindful of just remembering, the blessings that we have despite this biblical moment we're going through.
Right.
Yeah. It's definitely a challenge. And one last question. Have you ever done a collaboration with an artist, like doing a live arts experience, and how that artist is impacted by the music? Because I've been in some events and we've coordinated some, not here at another museum I had, but there's artists that are willing to do live painting or live creative experiences, but then use music as inspiration. Have you ever done that type of collaboration?
No, but I'd like to.
Okay. So that's the beginning of another conversation. Good.
That's great. I love that. That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think we've ever done that. Yeah.
Ever is good. It's good that you're not saying never, because then we'll see where this goes. Correct. So I'm going to do a very quick pitch. And Arturo, can I share my screen?
Yes.
Just to make sure that this is on people's radars. So this is the cover for Martha's book, if you're interested in learning more about what she's doing. And also you can get the Quetzal Imaginaries through the Smithsonian Folkways recording. So the links are in the chat. So feel free to explore. And I just wanted to put this
who's distributing the newest
It's also
album?
Smithsonian. It's
It's
called
always
Cuentos Sonoros. Yeah, and it's also on the Smithsonian Folkways website, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. We'll put that in there. Martha, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sorry for the loss in your community, and thank you for bringing up this protection of hope. I think we've all have had some sort of loss, either through a direct impact of COVID on our families, or the sense of loss of hope and community for so many folks, right? So thank you for joining us and creating a bit of comunidad, a bit of familia for all of us. It's been so special for me, and I'm sure for our audience.
Oh, Griselda, thank you so much for the really thoughtful questions and for inviting me here today. Solimar, thank you so much. For Mola, for the work that you're doing, and for taking an interest in women of color and their art and their, what we're doing, and for just valuing it. Giving it this kind of space is about valuing it. And so I think then that is also social justice, right? And I'm glad that the museum is engaging in that kind of work.
Martha, you mentioned Judy Baca earlier, and Mola has a Judy Baca retrospective right now.
I heard.
Yes.
Oh my God. Well, so then this provokes the question, are you around early December? And I'd love to invite you and anybody in the band, or just your family, whoever, to come over to Mola, and I'd love to show you the exhibition.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. I'm a huge, and it's interesting, when we talked about the exhibit in Washington, one of the things that made me think like, wow, I would love to be a part of that is that Judy Baca, she's the way she kind of pulled me in. She said, well, it's not just going to be you. It's also Judy Baca is donating her smock, like not a smock, but her overalls that she paints in, along with some pinceles that she's used. And so I was like, hell yeah, I want to be a part of anything Judy Baca has to do with, right? So that's why I decided to say like, yes, take my tarima, take my shoes. And so it's great to be in her presence and to stand on the shoulder of a giant like herself.
Again, that's okay. So we have a pending conversation. I'll send you some other emails to see what we can do. And I think, are we ready to wrap it up? All right. So thank you everybody for being here with us. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. We went over to 7:10, but again, being able to share this space, it's just such a unique experience. So we really want to take advantage of it. So again, from behalf of MOLA, thank you, Martha, for your time, your talent, and to your family as well. Thank you, Griselda, for being our cómplices in this program, and keep it going. By the way, I love the frames.
Thank you.
Looking good. And thank you everyone for sticking around. Have a good evening.
Buenas noches.
Night.